So, seeing that we have a quorum of commission members, I'm calling the meeting of the Ethics Commission to order. So our first order of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was in November 13th, 2025. Are there any changes to the minutes that anyone would like to propose? Changes, additions, amendments? If not, I'll consider a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. Thank you. So the next order of business is a review of a draft of our complaint form that we've been working on for the last few months. So the complaint form, the way it has been structured, it almost looks as if you could file a complaint against just about anybody for just about anything. And you know, we all know we've seen experiences where we've seen complaints come in. So the effort here was to try to tighten up the form itself so as to signal to people that the Ethics Commission does not have jurisdiction or authority to consider complaints against everybody and complaints of every nature or whatever. This doesn't prevent someone from still following a complaint that might be difficult for us to deal with, but at least it alerts people to that change. So the biggest thing is on the first page, identifying that we don't have jurisdiction over certain classes of individuals, and the person filing the complaint would have to take note of that and recognize that, and that it might, in some instances, just stop complaints in their tracks before they're filed, where we might have to go through one of those preliminary hearings where where we know it's a foregone conclusion that we're not going to be able to go to a full hearing. So that was the principal thing, and then cleaning up a little bit the language about the nature of the allegation. And actually, I have a little bit of an additional change I'd like to suggest on the second page. It's not here, but on C, where it says, if applicable and known, please cite the ordinance or law that have been violated by the conduct alleged. I'd like just at least for us to consider changing that to eliminating applicable and. So if known, it would read, please cite the provisions of the Ethics Act, and then in parentheses, or another ordinance or law that may have been violated by the misconduct alleged. In other words, again, signaling the complainant that we're looking for stuff that applies to the Ethics Act. So you know, it's not it could be left blank because they don't know, but at least it sort of alerts them that it's going to be provisions in the Ethics Act that's going to be something that we would take seriously and consider. So that would be a change that, you know, in looking this over again. So anyway, so and then the last item that's changed is where it's a waiver of confidentiality. We had asked people if they wanted to waive confidentiality without necessarily any explanation as to what that might entail. So this just puts a little bit of an explanatory note, you know, as to why, what's the significance of that. So that's the change to the form, and we have authority under the Ethics Act to have whatever form we want for the most part, and so it's up to us to decide whether we want to make this change or not. So comments, suggestions, changes?
I may just briefly point everybody's attention to Section 4 under the waiver of confidentiality, Part A. I may just recommend to remove the reference to Section 2523, subsection 3, and instead maybe just say 2523 if we're going to amend the ordinance itself and end up changing the actual subsection to where the mention of confidentiality might change. So just limit it to Section 2523 instead of 2523, subsection 3.
Okay. Any comments or suggestions or operations or anything else? I mean, again, what we're struggling with here is is trying to kind of tighten up our complaint process so that we don't find ourselves, yeah.
Is it possible to add hyperlinks on this document if it was like a PDF online, wherever it mentions like the Ethics Act? I mean, someone might wonder, I don't even know what that actually means. Can we just
Yeah,
hyperlink it?
Yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea. Yeah, that is a great idea. So even better because it gets them, look at this, There's if there's something in the Ethics Act you think went awry, that's what we're looking for. Yeah, good.
Same for like section 25 to 23. I mean, it could.
Yeah.
I wonder if it could bring it right to that,
Yeah,
so it could just go straight there.
yeah. So embed hyperlinks with the citations. Mackenzie, can we do that? Yeah, okay. Any other changes or any other? If not, could I have a motion to approve the new revised form with the changes that I mentioned and Gabby mentioned and Trace mentioned to what we have before us? Is
So
there a
moved.
motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. Oh, we have, we have a new complaint form, and I think what we may do is just see what happens, and we could hear from Mackenzie and Abby in terms of people coming in wanting to file complaints, and they see the new form, whether it seems to have some effect, So the next agenda item is a summary report of the 2024 financial interest statements. So just a little background to remind you. The commission is responsible for the conduct of this annual exercise and having folks that are designated by various means to submit financial interest statements. The council clerk is the custodian of those forms, and this act, the Ethics Act, specifically provides when these have to be submitted, how long they have to be retained, and all of that. So all of that is within the act. There is no provision in the act as to requiring anybody to look at these things when they're submitted. None in the act. Of course, there's nothing to prevent us from looking at these disclosures when they're submitted, but while we're responsible for maintaining the system, there's no one or no body or no individual who's required to review these. So I've been familiar with and involved in a lot of conflict of interest regimes, mostly in academic medicine, and I've never seen one where someone isn't looking at the disclosures that's part of it. So I thought, I would take this on myself and just look at it. There was 113 submitted. This is a very cursory overview. I did not spend hours doing this. It probably took a couple of hours at the most to just go through this, but I was specifically looking for a couple of things. How many people have outside employment? I thought that might be an interesting thing to see. And the fact that most council members, almost all, have outside employment is not a surprise given the discussions about council pay recently and that sort of thing. But we do have a number of LFUCG employees who also have one form or another outside employment. And the other thing is I thought I would take a look at how many folks declared that they had rental properties or income properties in Fayette County. I thought that might be a significant thing, and you can see the numbers here. There are a number. But the thing I wanted to look at most of all was how many people identified a potential conflict of interest that they might have, because the language in the form, and it's language that's specified in the Ethics Act, asks whether you may, not that you do, but you may have a conflict of interest given these interests. And out of 113 people, three, I think, in my opinion, read that question correctly. 2 employees who have spouses, and they stated that their spouse's employment might create for them a conflict of interest. And 1 employee who works on the outside as an attorney, who stated that there might be some actions that he would be taking. But the rest didn't seem to didn't seem to get it, that, it's possible that, it's not that, the question isn't asking, do you actually have one now, and what is it? It's just that, given these things. So I'm not quite sure what we want to do with that, whether we want to take a look at the form itself and see whether we want to change a little bit of the language. We can't ask a different question because, again, the Ethics Act itself specifies the exact language. And in fact, the notary on the form, having a notary sign before a notary is specific about that last question on the form. That's what you have to swear to in front of a notary, so it's specific to that. But whether you could put some prompt in front of that question to say, look, and to see what we get. But the concern here is that you have a lot of people, not a lot, but you have a good number of people who have all kinds of financial interests, income property in the county, employment on the outside, and they might not have a sense of themselves being in the position where they would have a potential conflict of interest. I know from my experience in academic medicine, that question is no longer asked because the experience has been this was terrible underreporting, not because people are trying to hide things, but I would never think myself to be anything but objective in performing my official duties. I wouldn't be compromised. And of course, we're all going to judge that about ourselves, and because of that, you wouldn't state you have a conflict of interest, that sort of thing. So in my experience, what has happened is that people stop asking that question and just ask for specific information about relationships, financial interest, and then somebody is looking at all of that to see whether there are any potential issues that might arise from those disclosures. So, and the final comment I make is that, this is, it's 113. We have, 119 this year? Is that right? 118? So it's I didn't know whether we might want to constitute a little subcommittee, financial interest statement subcommittee, that every year when they're all in, maybe 3 of us, divvy up the pile and take a look and see whether there's anything interesting, what the numbers might be like, just to take a look at it, so that somebody's looking at these forms and maybe perhaps providing some feedback or reaction or doing something about this disclosure process. So that's I don't know whether you have any thoughts about that, or whether we should continue doing this. I mean, whether you want me to continue doing this every year. I certainly, I'm retired, so I certainly have a couple, 3 hours every once in a while to look at this stuff. So.
Well, I don't mind helping out. I think it's worthwhile for somebody to look at it. One thing I thought about is if we have a complaint against someone that has made one of these disclosures, I wonder if we should pull that or look at it in conjunction with their request to either engage in an outside business or someone's complaint that they are doing something improper. And if for no other reason than to say, hey, you really need to disclose, this is something that you didn't disclose, and you really need to, or going forward, if you do this business, this is something that you need to put on your disclosure. It just might be another thing that we use these for.
So we could always, whenever we get a complaint against someone, we could always ask for if that person filed a disclosure and what the form is, and take a look at it to see what's there. You can always do that, which would be a pretty good check. So, any other comments? So you're hired.
If I can jump in, I will say they can be sent electronically as long as I redact certain information. So you wouldn't have to all get together and do it in person. You wouldn't have to come to the council clerk's office and sit at our little break room table and do it. We could send them to you, so it would be easier.
Even that's no big, I'm across the street, but.
Yeah, well, Mackenzie sent me the electronic forms, and it's just, just put them in a file and take a look at them when you get a chance, so, yeah. Any other comments or suggestions? So maybe we could leave it at this, if this is acceptable, that we'll think about putting together a subcommittee, that when the new forms are finally in after April 15th, sometime after that, we can pull together three of us and take a look at them, and then report back in a way that's maybe similar to this at some subsequent meeting, so that at least somebody's looking at this, and we can inform the city and county government, Durban County government, that we are taking a look at these things, so, okay. All right? Good. So, all right, the next order of business are the ethics tip line report. I don't know if anyone has any comments or anything that strikes out. I don't know if you know this, is maybe more information you need, but the requirement that organizations have tip lines, ethics lines, and that sort of thing was actually created by the Federal Sentencing Commission. And this is a little bit of history, it might be interesting. The Federal Sentencing Commission wanted to know what kind of mitigation might be brought forward when it's not an individual that's being sentenced, but it's a corporation. So they came forward, this Sentencing Commission came forward with these guidelines that a corporation can follow that might serve as mitigation if it was going to be fined or sentenced in a federal action. And one of the requirements was that there be a tip line. So almost every organization in the country developed these tip lines. There are companies that run these tip lines. The vast majority of reports are human resource complaints, almost across the board, So not much whistleblowing going on. So anyway, a little bit of history. So if there's no comments or suggestions about what's in the tip line reports, the tip line reports we received from the mayor's office, we will accept them as having been submitted and reviewed by the commission. The final matter of business for today is the update on actually the financial interest statement. So we have some coming in.
Yep, we have a bunch coming in.
So-
We got one today from our new council member, so that's exciting. But I misspoke, it was 119. I guess now it's 120 financial interest statements. So far, I think it's higher than 43 now. I think it's probably around 46. We have 25 candidates who aren't already elected officials, and so far I've gotten about 14 or 15 of those. And I have all their email addresses, so I've been corresponding with them via email. And then the additions to this year that I'm very happy to report are that we put an email address line on the form so that if I need to correspond with them via email next year, I can do that. And also, you can send them electronically as long as they're notarized. So,
Good.
yeah.
Any comments? Is there any new business?
Do you want to talk about the subcommittee at all to revise the Ethics Commission?
Yeah, so-
Or the Ethics Act?
Yeah, so we need to re-meet or call another meeting of the subcommittee. It will be Trace and Delora and myself. So we had a meeting scheduled, but because of the complaint and the initial scheduling of that complaint, we decided to cancel that. So I've worked up a red line version of actually the Ethics Act that we can start going through and working on it. So we'll call a meeting of that and get that going. So some future time for a commission meeting, that little group will bring forward some suggestions and recommendations regarding going forward to the council changing the Ethics Act. And by the way, recently I had lunch with A.J. Singleton, and he actually volunteered to appear before the council in terms of some of the changes we've been talking about, as a former chair of the commission, so I told AJ he can do it, and I said of me, so. Anyway, so we'll get that going, and then we have a complaint hearing, preliminary hearing on March 2nd, Monday, March 2nd, and it's going to be virtual. If that's, unless someone has a complaint about that, I think it can be handled, this complaint, in a virtual meeting, and will save us all the trip downtown, or at least to this building, so, okay. Any other new business to? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved, second? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.